Welcome back. There are growing calls for the deadly Israel-Hamas conflict to come to an end. A group of South Africans have joined the global march to Gaza, which is aimed at highlighting the plight of Palestinians. Participant Hasina Kathrada joins us now to tell us more about the march. Hasina, very good evening to you. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time. So you embarked on this march to Gaza, and you were with many other delegates, over 2,000 people globally coming together for the plight of Palestinians in getting humanitarian aid at a time that they so urgently needed. And you've described this as no symbolic journey, but rather a moral reckoning. Just talk to us about that journey. Give us context in terms of where it began and how far you were able to go with this march.
Hi, good evening, Katlego, and it's good to be here. I got back from Cairo this afternoon. I set out on the journey on Wednesday, along with 55 other South Africans, and we were part of actually 4,000 delegates from around the world, representing 86 countries. This is an international global solidarity movement, the Global March to Gaza, and the plan was to cross the Sinai from in Egypt and reach the Rafah border, and to camp there for a few days and call for the opening of the border to allow much needed aid to get into Gaza. It was not to get to cross into Gaza, but just to be there and to mobilize, and mainly to let the people of Gaza know that the world has not forgotten them. So it was a great privilege to be among the South Africans that were there. Unfortunately, we did not make it to the Rafah border. We got as far as about an hour away from Cairo. I got to a checkpoint an hour away. There were two other checkpoints earlier. So we did not reach Rafah, but I think, the mission was accomplished in raising global awareness and in initiating similar initiatives, symbolic initiatives across the world, for example, in London, in The Hague, in Brussels, and that's been achieved.
So let's just maybe talk about the reason why you weren't able to reach Rafah. I mean, we saw some of those reports in terms of the assault that was from the Egyptian authorities to some of the delegates who were on this march, passports being forcibly taken from many of the delegates. What led to that conflict?
So this march was planned, obviously weeks ahead. By international organizers. Egyptian authorities did not give permission for us to actually cross certain checkpoints. So what happened was we were stopped at various checkpoints. Different groups were stopped. The group that I was in made it to the Camp Hashir toll station. Others didn't make it that far. My passport was confiscated for about 6 hours. I was with a group of about 250 people, delegates from Turkey, from Europe, the United Kingdom, France, and we were in a kind of encampment there. When our passports were given to us, that's when things got out of hand, and the authorities basically shoved people onto buses and took us. We were taken back to Cairo and just dropped off at various locations across the city. And, we had to make our way to hotels or wherever we were staying. So when we left Cairo on Friday morning, we checked out of hotels because the idea was to get to a place called Arish, cross the Sinai, get to Arish, which is about a 5-hour journey. And at Arish, to actually walk 2 to 3 days to the Rafah border. So the plan was for us to walk a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the evening, because it's really hot there. And of course, that didn't happen. So when we got back to Cairo, most of us didn't have accommodation. We didn't have hotel rooms. So we had to find accommodation and, make our way around it.
Right. And just being in that space and having that kind of experience, did that open your eyes in any way even more to really what the people of Palestine are experiencing? If you're there as a marcher, with everything that you have access to, you can only imagine with them not having any of that humanitarian aid and having to live day by day in the situations that they're currently facing.
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I was, thinking about it, and I think the little inconvenience that I have felt over, the past 2 or 3 days, what happened the entire day on Friday, just really opened my eyes to, what people in Gaza are actually going through. So it was a small price for us, the 4,000 people that gathered in Cairo and experienced this kind of brutality, the resistance that we experienced. It was harsher for some people, but it also showed the global support. And the people of Gaza, I think, know and felt the support that they have, that the world has not forgotten them, and that people will continue. We may not have reached Rafah, but I don't think that, our support and our voices and our action stopped, or any of it was unsuccessful.
You speak of this showing global support, but it also shines a spotlight on Egypt. I mean, a country that receives great military aid from the US, which has ties with Israel. What perception does this then bring of Egypt as a neighboring country?
There was a lot of hostility that we felt from authorities while we were there. Even before we left, it was quite, made clear to us, just make sure that, you don't aggravate anyone when you enter. You don't enter with, for example, a kufia. When you're traveling, keep it low. So we were very aware that, we were not welcome there for the reason that we had gone there. And then, of course, closer to the march on Thursday, plans seemed to be changing, and it was quite tense. After the treatment by authorities, there was military police, plainclothes police, privately hired officers in plainclothes, and the manner in which people were treated, I think shone a light on Egypt itself, and I think that's a political discussion to be had.
Do you think, as an activist, with how far you've come with that over 4,000 crowd that was in Egypt, in the message that you tried to get out there, that maybe some international bodies will really push even more for this humanitarian aid to reach where it needs to get to in Gaza?
Yes. I think the response to the movement has been overwhelming. I was lucky enough to speak to the coordinating head of the Global March to Gaza at the toll station where I was at, and he said that it's been so successful, and whether we reach further than this point, where we were, it doesn't matter, because the success has been achieved. globally, the spotlight was there, and the initiatives that followed, the impact of this march has been phenomenal. So yes, I think it definitely did get the attention of many, many more solidarity movements, and that the movement will just grow and get stronger.
Certainly, we certainly do hope that the movement will grow, especially for that over 500,000 Palestinians that are on the brink of starvation. We certainly think that the humanitarian aid that needs to get to them needs to get there sooner than later. Thank you so much for your time. That's Hasina Kathrada, who's one of the delegates who was on that journey, in that march to the border of Rafah in order to call for humanitarian aid to reach Palestinians. We'll have more news coming up when we return.